Hello and welcome to Podcasting as Praxis. I'm James and my pronouns are they and them.
I'm Jamie, my pronouns are he and him.
I'm Rob, mine are he and him.
And I'm Alistair and my pronouns are also he and him.
No David tonight. Papa is away. He has taken a sojourn into the mountains and we do not know whence he will descend. But in his absence, we've decided we're gonna make up for his lack of being here by giving you something else to bring you a little bit lower. So, instead of bitter Scottish cynicism, we decided we're going to go for existential despair in the form of some glad tidings from Rob, I think. Rob?
Yeah.
And a 5% reduction in whimsy. Don't forget that.
Exactly. And a market reduction in Star Trek references, and also Star Wars references, come to think of that.
Star references generally.
Star references in general. Fuck the star system.
Frankly, the start of the solar system was the first mistake.
Yes.
As soon as that gas started to coalesce, I had a bad feeling.
Anyway, so it's we haven't done this for a while, but I thought we would do another episode of finance shenanigans. So I've only got like 9 pages worth of notes, so it's gonna be a quick one.
Jesus fucking Christ! and by the way, dear listener, this is the first of 2 episodes we're recording this evening. The other one also financial related, except we're reviewing the film Margin Call as well.
Good.
So we're getting
so good.
We are going to get our brains turned to mush in this first episode, and then reconstituted and enjoying Paul Bettany in the second half.
Exactly.
So it's going to be very fun.
Reconstituted as fine paste.
Look forward to that cultural committee at a later date, and when you hear it, know that this is where the trouble began.
Yeah, and also know that none of it is my fault. So I thought before we get onto the main topic, I thought we would discuss 2 bits from the completely unreal economy first.
I personally, Rob, prefer the Unity economy. There's lots of assets you can purchase on it, and it works really well for all my development needs. Buy Unity.
So before we get into something that still barely exists, I wanted to talk about something that has just ceased existing, but I didn't know about it. I just wanted to bid a fond farewell to one of the dumbest NFT collections I've ever seen in my entire life. Sadly, and I'm sure for all our
There's a lot of competition for that type, I'm sure.
No, this specific one is the, sadly, and I'm sure all of our listeners are deeply invested in this, is CNN is winding up its Vault NFT collection. So I didn't know this, but CNN was putting out NFTs called Moments, and essentially you could buy original NFTs of CNN headlines of big news.
Why, Rob?
What
why?
the fuck, like?
Why
don't
did you
know.
do this? Why? Why was this? Why was this? Just every time someone says, "Hey, what about these NFTs?" and it's just the stupidest conceivable idea you could ever think of. An NFT of fucking what's his face's first tweet. Who cares?
Okay, but how else is CNN supposed to make money by selling the headline about some fucking terror attack to some incel dipshit who thinks it was great?
Imagine thinking that a Sun headline was so good that you wanted to spend $200,000 on a digital version that you can't even put on your wall in a frame or some shit, freakish enough if you're trying to do that with an actual newspaper. But even worse if it's just fucking digital.
Some YouTube influencer buying the fucking headline of a school shooting. That they will then own forever and charge Alex Jones every time he claims it wasn't real.
You're saying all this and it's just put a cursed alternate timeline in my head, which is the timeline that the Sun didn't finish page 3. Just Jesus fucking Christ, that's exactly the vibe.
Well, I mean, Alistair, it can get dumber, and it did, because CNN was also apparently...
No, of course it did.
In the process of partnering with another startup called Infinite Objects that was creating specialized display cases so you could display, your apes or your CNN moments from the vault.
Oh, my fucking God.
You could just put them on the wall.
A digital picture frame. Is that what this is?
Exactly, but
It's just a fucking folder filled with images.
Yeah, but you
well,
could...
Well done, you've reinvented the folder format.
Imagine it, you could have, let's say, a screen with pixels, and then you could hang that up on the wall, and then people could see your ape on it.
What this is, it's those like digital photo frames that you get from like Argos or wherever, and you just plug a USB stick in with all your photos from your phone. It's one of those, but instead of like accepting a USB stick, it's hard coded to display the image at the link you own, and then they charge you an extra like $3,000 for it or something.
Exactly.
Does it have like a little extra like LCD screen in the frame that says, memes if NFTs go to the moon, and then if they start going down, it flips to memes if NFTs crash? Because it feels like that kind of vibe.
Honestly, I think that
Probably.
extra screen should just rotate constantly. You fool, you idiot, fucker, moron, you buffoon. But that may just be me. I mean, but it is sad.
I've got an idea. I've just had an idea. We invent a screen that rotates your PDFs for you.
Yeah.
I do have some.
Just superimposes a graph of like how far your fucking investment's fallen over the top of the
NFT. Just points you to the nearest high roof. Yeah.
When it drops below when it drops below a certain threshold, a little like tray pops out of the bottom with a suicide pill in it.
Did you guys see that fucking Zillow Gone Wild tweet on Twitter, which was a guy listing an NFT house? Did you guys see it?
Yes, I did see that. That was the... I didn't buy a real house. I bought a $300K fake house. That was that, right?
Wait, was this a house made of NFTs or like a house in the metaverse?
No, it was just
a
a metaverse house for like $300K. Like, I could have bought like a real house, but I bought a metaverse house instead.
Oh, that's actually not what I'm talking about, Rob. It's even dumber than that.
Oh, okay.
We're playing top trumps, but with just the stupidest conceivable deck. The deck is just filled with NFTs.
Yeah, and ironically, searching for the NFT house I was looking for, I have instead found another NFT house. Like,
Why do they keep making these?
I don't know. It's very,
fuck, like?
yeah. I guess it's just like everyone thinks I'll get in on the scam and do something too. So here's my NFT house for you to purchase.
It just looks like a shitty California house. Like
This is like, I am absolutely like the worst fucking crime of these like fucking crypto dipshits and their metaverse and everything is that they make me keep fucking remembering like Second Life. Because this is exactly, remember like 10, 15 years ago when there was all those stories about people who bought real estate in Second Life? This is the same thing, except those people actually made money.
Hey, look, Jamie, at least there's a wholesome use for Second Life, and some people just go on there to get horny. The NFTs have no functional use.
Yeah.
Well, you say this.
Yeah, no one has anything below the waist in the metaverse, specifically because they were afraid of ever making any money out of it.
Well, I mean, Alistair, you say this,
vibe.
but like you could have been. Well, you still can because you can still buy CNN moments. Unfortunately, the $100 NFT of Mandela walking from prison has unfortunately been sold out. But for $50, you still can become the proud owner of an NFT celebrating the launch of CNN Plus, the CNN streaming service, which has also folded in the meantime. So not only can you buy a folded NFT, you can buy something that celebrates a streaming service that has also folded, which I do. What
shows were on this streaming service? Was it the news?
Pretty much, it's like I don't know, Wolf Blitzer makes sandwiches, or Jake. It was like an Oprah.
All of our favorite pundits.
It was it was like an Oprah's book club, but with Jake Tapper in it.
I'm just picturing now bored wolf NFTs. Yeah, fits.
I'm trying to think if there's any British news pundit who I would actually want to see in anything. Or anything at all, really. And I don't think I can name a single one who I give enough of a shit about to think, oh, it's got person X in it. Maybe I'll watch it.
Yeah, you're not excited about like the Piers Morgan Sunday Kitchen show or some shit like that?
Definitely not.
But apparently, though, like even though CNN is no longer making these stupid fucking NFT moments, they have said to like the people who have already invested in this, don't worry, you'll get
invested.
Yeah, no, you'll get
the rubes who've been parted from their like $50 or whatever.
Yeah, but don't worry about it because like you can get some of your money back, and by money I mean they'll throw some other crypto token called Flow into your wallet or a stable coin. So I assume you'll just get your money back. back. And for totally...
Imagine having an even worse returns policy than store credit.
I mean, I had a quick look at Flow at its price levels. It created from a high of about $40 last year to just under $2 today. So I assume that what you want back is a really unstable coin instead of your shit CNN asset.
No better time to buy the dip, quite frankly.
I hope there's like, I think that some of the only like possibly positive people involved in all of these NFTs and shit, if it's possible to do, is the people who are shorting all these fucking stupid coins and NFTs and whatever the fuck. Because like at least they're making money out of these things going out of business.
I don't even know if you can short NFTs. If you could, that'd be
that's
amazing.
what I was thinking.
I'd get on that in very much of a hurry. But the other thing I wanted to mention, there was a great piece on CoinDesk called "It's Lonely in the Metaverse," and would it surprise you to? So like. Would it surprise you to learn that like
that feeling when no girlfriend in the metaverse? Yes.
So like some of the bigger, or at least like the more touted existing like crypto tie-in metaverses that do actually exist right now, don't actually appear to have that many users, even though they have got like valuations at over $1 billion US at the moment. So one of them, called Decentraland, which is on the Ethereum chain, had apparently 38 active users in 24 hours last week, which, you know, I think you agree is less than spectacular.
I saw this. It's fucking great. We have less users than the worst trash fucking games that you can find on Steam for like £1.50, and we are worth multiple billions of dollars.
What's really funny about it is it proves the thesis that if you add horny, it will actually be like alright, essentially, because the horny games on Steam all universally have more users than that, I'll guarantee you.
Yeah, if they call it like Decontraland or something, then they would have like, hey, look, I don't make the rules. They have like 100,000 times more users.
Yeah, like the sad thing is, I think you're right.
But it looks like it's. I can't believe that it doesn't have like more users because I had a little rummage through it. Apparently, there's two main things you can do in Decentraland, according to CoinDesk. The first is you
masturbate and cry.
Close. You can buy virtual property and then build shit on it. And also, the other thing you can do is you can buy and sell like NFTs of like skins for your character, and then sell those on to other people. So like I can't understand why this virtual property empire with like Second Life graphics isn't like a roaring success. I can't work it out.
Imagine having worse graphics in 2022 than Second Life.
Well, I've just posted a picture in the Discord if you want to have a look. It just looks incredibly like bleak and depressing as well, and the draw distance of about 3 meters.
Bleak is right.
To be fair, you are there all on your own, so I do understand the prime thing to do in there.
It looks like someone's just literally done that thing before that I was saying and made a Unity engine game, essentially, and then tagged multiplayer on top of it and called it a day.
Yeah.
Like, it's got that kind of semi-shitty, cell-shaded look of a lot of, like, freemium Unity assets.
Yeah, but the other...
Yeah, I see exactly what you're saying.
But the other one, which is slightly more popular, because apparently it has...
Those graphics aren't that bad. I would posit that it's like how... It's like how being like fucking right wing makes you look like fucking like a horrible gremlin.
It's the lack of art. Yeah, it's like, a lot of the lack of aesthetic and art direction.
No, I mean if that exact same screenshot was from a game and you said, "Oh yeah, this is in early access," and you farm like cute little pigs and they like run around and build little pig houses and stuff, you'd go, "Oh, isn't that sweet?" But because it's like, "Oh yeah, it's some dipshit's fucking like capitalist wank fantasy," and what you do is you like wank over capitalist fantasies in it, you just go, "Yeah, fuck that noise. That looks terrible."
Yeah, fair enough. Well, I mean, if you want shittier graphics, Jamie, may I introduce you to the other thing is also worth more than $1 billion and had 500 users per 24 hours last week. It's called The Sandbox, and it looks basically like a shittier version of Minecraft.
Oh God. Is that a chomp on top of a wall? No, it's the mouse thing.
So
God.
is this
It's a dead mouse thing, yeah.
Is Dead Mouse involved with this project at all?
I don't know, but I do know that Tony Hawk is involved. He's teaming up with The Sandbox to bring
Oh, for fuck's sake, Tony.
Yeah.
You were meant to be the good one.
Well, he has his own line of NFTs these days, so fuck that guy.
Oh, well, in the bin with you.
I mean, this one is slightly...
Why is there a Smurf? Why is there a Smurf in this
Yeah,
picture?
there's a
What is
Smurf
going
there.
I
on?
like that little bit above the Smurf that says, "You don't own an Alpha Pass."
Get it on OpenSea.
Yeah, you fucking beta. You need an alpha pass to come into my house.
Well, in order to...
Now you see, that looks like dog shit.
Yes, it does.
Yes,
We
it
can
really
absolutely
does.
100% agree.
So for the benefit of the listener, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 dead mouse heads. 7 if you include the guy in an outfit with a dead mouse head on it. For some inscrutable reason on this.
I don't think that's a guy, Alistair. I think that's a statue.
Fuck's sake.
And the reason being, on the right-hand side, you see a guy sprinting with a name above him.
Yeah.
Oh,
Whereas
yeah.
the one on the left doesn't. I think that and the Smurf and the whatever that guy is on the left are statues.
That's
Oh, yeah.
hand Guybrush Threepwood solo.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
But yeah, I mean, don't worry about it, because like the Sandbox is actually more convoluted than the other one, because in the Sandbox, according to Coinbase again, you have to, in order to participate in like buy virtual property, you have to buy sand crypto tokens, and with your sand crypto tokens, you can buy even more limited availability land tokens, which is property, in which you can make like mini games and then charge people crypto to play your mini game within the ugly landscape. But in order
If you want to own land, first you need to own sand. Right.
Exactly.
Just
Yes.
simple logical steps.
But in order to build something on your land, you need even more crypto tokens called assets, which are then again subdivided into even more crypto tokens called gems and catalysts. So this sounds very simple, and you know who wouldn't want to be part
I
of
hate
that?
this so much. I hate
Oh
every
yeah,
aspect of this.
I'm sorry. I'm violently disassociating. I'm just hearing in my head, Dragonborn. If you wish to construct your home, first you must mine clay. Just like the least favorite part of regular games turned into the entire point of this horse shit.
It is violent horseshit, but I will say, like, it does look like overall like this whole at least the NFT thing. Like, I think it's like, I don't know. I'm sure it'll survive in some mutant form, because this shit never goes away, because like people are just like pumped too much cash into it essentially. But like it's essentially like, because the economy is sort of real-ish again, it does look like this shit's on the way out, which like it's been replaced with other horrible shit, but at least this seems to be somewhat over.
Yeah, the tulips have well and truly wilted.
Yes, very much.
Which is, silver linings.
There was also
who was it one of Jack's NFTs at Jack's NFTs that has like lost 99.99% of his value, bought it for like tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, worth like $20 now.
Yeah.
I think
Him and everyone else.
Wasn't it Jack sold the first ever tweet he did as an NFT, and the person who bought it lost all the money? So Jack's sitting pretty, but they're the ones who've lost out.
I mean, surely
Probably
whoever's
both.
holding that NFT is like the loser in the chain for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about having some I'd say poor schmuck just like holding the bag, right? It's just some
it's hot
getting
potato.
some
Having some
Yeah,
rich
yeah, absolutely.
schmuck.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I think in the meantime, even like Facebook does not appear to be able to like actually create like what's that thing called again? Infinity Worlds. Like that's just going nowhere fast. There was a big piece in the FT last week that they've put it on what's called a quality lockdown for the rest
Suicide
of the
Watch? Oh, okay.
year. That is pretty much
You're
what
not
it
wrong.
is.
It'll be so good if like the metaverse tanks Facebook forever.
It's not
think it's going to,
impossible that
Jamie.
it does, because they like the division of Facebook that's doing their Infinity Worlds metaverse thing has like racked up 27 billion in losses in the last 3 years. But apparently Zuckerberg is like, it is the future, and we will keep plowing like money into it. So for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
I mean,
Everybody
if the thing
get in the spruce goose.
If nothing else, it is fun to see it demonstrated to us that money isn't real, and the only thing that is really real is like power. Because could you imagine any other sort of institution or business or whatever just literally throwing away $9 billion a year for literally nothing, not even really ideological gain, just funneling it down a fucking black hole?
No, it
worth
is, it
nothing.
is actually... Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you there, Alistair, and say this is ideological. You've got to remember that Zuckerberg models himself after Emperor Augustus. No joke, no hyperbole. He really does.
Yeah,
That's
he does
why
do
he has
that.
the
Yeah,
shitty haircut.
I remember this.
Yeah.
And he pictures himself as being the man of the Renaissance, and he had to go at, like, I'll stand for president, and then that quickly got shot down on contact with reality, right? As people
Well,
went,
what he
"Wow,
really
you
needed
weirdo,
to do
piss
is
off."
assemble his adoptive father's legions and then marched on Rome, and then all of his problems would have been resolved.
Kind of, yeah. And so what he's doing instead, and the reason we have this meta stuff, is he's making a bid going, well, okay, if I control the land on which the future is made, then I can be the new Augustus. And that's what this is. So it is ideological to him. It's just that he is intensely stupid.
And it's also like, it's a very funny pivot where essentially Facebook is trying to become, because in order to create like a metaverse where people want to be, you have to sort of become like a game studio, right? You have to create a digital world where people want to hang out. Let me read you a little bit from the FT article.
Just before you do that, I just want to say, like, the idea of Mark Zuckerberg, of all people, creating a video game that people enjoy is just completely anathema to him because he's completely anhedonic.
Yes. The problem with Meta and its development is the fragmented nature of the different software product teams and initiatives within Meta, frequent changes of direction, and a lack of coherent vision for a social network that incorporates virtual and augmented reality. So essentially, it's just like they're just trying to do a Ubisoft, but like shittier without pants on.
They're
With
trying
the
to
same
appease...
amount of sexual assault, though.
Well, they're trying to appease the whims of the boy king.
Yes.
Like, that's what's going on there.
According to a Meta memo shared by at least one person on their Facebook profile, external creators complained at a roundtable last month that Horizon Worlds was unstable and unreliable, and staff did not give them updates when they reported bugs or ahead of launches. So they're not even supporting like their external creators. So I quite frankly can't wait for this thing to fucking fall off the face of the earth and take the whole metaverse with it, because like I can't fucking handle it as actually being a thing. Like, it's just too depressing. And I still don't understand who wants to hang out in these things, right? Like, I genuinely... Who's this for?
It's modern tech, though, isn't it? It's like the entire, like, fucking premise behind modern tech is that they should solve problems nobody has in ways that nobody likes. So,
And use your boss to force you to use it, essentially.
Well, that's the thing they're going on. Like, the people who make it don't use it enough. So we need to have at least one team meeting a week within the metaverse so that we can like get used to it. And it's like, if you don't even know what it's for, you shouldn't be fucking making it. But it's just that thing where it's like all the cool like sci-fi cyberpunk books from the 80s had like a virtual computer world that you jack into and fly around in. And people will not stop trying to fucking invent that. And it's like, the thing is, though, it's a cool bit of future tech in the 80s. You look at it and you go, oh, wow, that would be like so cool if we could do that. And then nowadays, if you're still trying to actually recreate that in the exact same, like, it's a 3D thing and you fly around style, you're a fucking idiot, because like it turns out the actual practical version of that is the World Wide Web. And I hate to have to break that to everyone who got into tech just so they could like fucking create cyberspace for like fucking people to fly around and hack corpse in or whatever, but it's the web.
Yeah, and to kind of add to it, I maintain that a lot of this is from people who read Snow Crash unironically and didn't get the satire, and they're like, yes, I will... You know what this is? This is Zuckerberg wants to be hero protagonist and stroll into his metaverse with a katana, you know? That's what this is, and no amount of reality is going to dissuade him.
So he wants to redo, like, who was the guy again? The guy who created Ultima Online, who was like the king of the realm or whatever it was.
Was it
Richard
Garriott?
Richard Garriott, thank you very much. Yeah, who crowned himself king of his own online empire. But like, you could do that because like Ultima Online was shit, but like it was the best we had at the time, and
Yeah, but someone killed him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Also that. Yeah.
In the game, we should stress, just for clarification.
You should absolutely fucking grief the creators of any video games you're playing.
Yeah, absolutely. I still love that story where Richard Garriott turns up in Ultima Online to do like a presentation to his fawning crowds, and the devs forget to set the immortal flag on his character, and so someone just walks up and chips him, and that's like apparently that ended the whole event because they couldn't get him back quick enough, etc. I love that story.
I mean, if you could do that in the metaverse, I would almost stop. Like,
oh, you're kidding? The opportunity
if you could
to
kill
actually...
Mark Zuckerberg in VR and then he dies in real life, what a victory that'd be.
The ability to dunk on Zuckerberg in his own metaverse, it would actually get me paradoxically to sign up for the metaverse.
I mean, that's the thing though, it's not even going to have all of the like fun fucking like griefing events that you heard about back in the Second Life days.
No,
because
you're right.
you have to buy like 6 different kinds of crypto token to be allowed to write like 6 lines of code and put it into the fucking universe. So no one's going to go to the trouble of like making a thing that griefs because it would cost them too much money.
Apparently,
like,
they did.
You're not going to get any of the
off...
stuff where some guy is hosting a fucking like town hall and loads of like flying dicks invade, or my personal favorite, someone made a bouncy ball and coded it so that every time it crossed like a server boundary from one region to another, it split in 2.
Oh yeah, I remember that story.
Yeah, and it just overwhelmed all the servers, filled the entirety of Second Life with bouncy balls, and just crashed everything. And it's like you're not going to be able to do that because like it'll cost you too much money, but also they probably haven't implemented bouncy physics.
Yeah, and even if they did, like they would like. I imagine these people actually do spend like 2/3 of their development time trying to like create think of all the ways that people would try to have fun with metaverse shit, and then like blocking that. So like no flying dildos, no infinity spawning bouncy balls, no nothing like that. It's all because it has to be like kid friendly and grandma friendly and crazy racist friendly. So like all you can do is just float around in your non-existent underwear and like I don't know, buy shit.
I guarantee you they are not thinking of how people will like grief. Like actual good developers that are making useful products and know what they're doing rarely think of like all the ways people will try to grief them. A bunch of dipshits who like are making something they don't care about are absolutely not putting that level of thought in at all.
I know. I think that might be like the one thing they do care about because it's they have to maintain the image of Facebook as the friendly whatever thing.
No,
Rob, but you fundamentally misunderstand the attitude of someone who plays video games to annoy other people. Like Jamie, over to you.
Yeah, no, I mean like they can't even make Facebook safe for like children and old people to use. Yeah, it's a rasping pit of sin and vice that radicalizes the kindest grandmas until they join Stormfront and do a suicide bombing for the supremacy of the white race. They're absolutely not putting even a tenth of that much effort into stopping that from happening in the metaverse. If anything, the controversy and like publicity that would generate would be a huge boon for the project.
And like we have to respect our subject matter experts on this podcast.
Yeah, that's true.
We are on an episode tonight about financial shenanigans, Rob. You must respect the griefing shenanigans as well.
Yeah. Well, speaking. Oh, shall we transition into some weirdly real, essentially, it's quite a convoluted story, but essentially, it's how
While we're still on the news, can we just talk about what a fucking cunt Jamie Oliver is?
Yeah, sure, cunt.
Yeah, I mean, I sincerely hope
he becomes a better person.
I've hated that cunt since before I knew he existed. Like my entire life, I had this like just burning fucking fury in the heart of me, and I didn't know what it was for until someone showed me him.
What was today's thing again? He was mad again about the government dropping the sugar
He was mad
tax.
because he was mad because like
school meals.
The wokes say you're not allowed to beat your children, and that was actually the word he used.
What?
Beat as well. You're not allowed to beat your children, and it would look especially bad if like him, a famous TV chef, beat his children. So instead, he fed his 12-year-old daughter like fucking the world's 3rd hottest pepper or some shit to teach her a lesson for disrespecting.
Oh yeah, but that was from like a decade ago. That's from like 2010.
I don't know. I only saw it today. If I haven't seen it, it's news to me.
Fair enough.
That's why they call it news, because it's always new to someone.
No, I mean, he's in the news today because of he's doing another run at free school meals, and I think the sugar tax as well. I want to say, yeah, it's free school meals.
Right.
Well, as the Bhagavad Gita teaches us, every single person, every good person has a point of evil, and every bad person has a point of good. And his one point of good is recognizing that the sugar tax is kind of horseshit.
No, he wants the sugar tax back.
Yeah.
Oh, he wants it back.
Yeah, he's a pro.
Yeah, the government.
Never mind.
The government are talking
villain.
about getting rid of it because, regulation is woke, and John Cleese will be mad at them on fucking the GB News Doddery Racist Hour or whatever the fuck he's presenting over there. And so Jamie Oliver is furious that the mere suggestion that they might not punish the poor for eating what they want to eat. So yeah, best make that tax even more regressive if possible, just to appease that fat-tongued cunt.
That's a new one. Fat-tongued. Gonna file that one away.
Yeah. Anyway, is there anybody else you wanna take a swipe at and their personal beef, Jamie, or shall we move on to the main topic?
No, I think just fucking, you know what I mean? I think we're good with just remembering Jamie Oliver's like the worst fucking prick on this island.
Yep. Yeah, and also we did a whole episode about it. I can't remember the number, but maybe we'll splice that in. We watched his Food Revolution thing.
666, probably.
So with all that done, let's see if we can't dive into the main topic for today and the 8.5 pages of notes I have left. Is to talk about essentially how, almost by sheer force of accident, Liz Truss and definitely Kwasi Kwarteng almost fucked a significant chunk of the UK pension market, or are still in the process of doing that, because it's like these are ongoing shenanigans, at least as we're recording. So we didn't really talk about the Truss budget 2 weeks ago because I said it was too early, and that turned out to be mainly right about that. It's essentially, it was just like a hilarious failure. The main point was we're going to borrow more money for unfunded tax cuts to very rich people, stop the corporation tax rise, etc. And all that basically that set of announcements came on top of like a couple months long run in the financial markets that have been more and more volatile because of inflation, the war in Ukraine, energy prices. Like essentially everything and everyone was already very nervous about the general state of economies and numbers functioning in general. And the whole thing, and then several things happened. The pound cratered and the price of UK gilts shot through the roof. Don't worry, we'll explain more as we go along. And it ended up last week already with the Bank of England announcing that they were doing an emergency purchase of UK gilts over the weekend to paper over some material cracks that were starting to show up in the bedrock of the UK economy, aka some of its pension funds. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about this week, which is what happened on Friday over the weekend, and again Monday and today while recording. Why did the Bank of England need to sort of put more money in, even though they were announcing they were going to stop doing that? And I'm going to try not to do predictions because predictions are always stupid. And also, this is not financial advice, et cetera, et cetera.
Though having said that, Rob, did you see that someone decided their mortgage strategy based on listening to us and Trash Future?
Yeah. I mean, Godspeed to you, but once again...
God have mercy,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, this is not financial advice, you idiot.
Yeah, you idiot fucking
so,
moron.
Good luck.
I mean, I think that was
A cool person.
on Twitter. I'm fairly sure of that. And
Yeah, I wasn't going to name them, but all right, sure.
Otherwise, a good poster, and Godspeed to you. But please don't follow along with us every time, because we really don't want to be liable for.
However, if the money that you do save on your mortgage, show some love to your favourite podcast.
Yeah.
By all means.
All we're saying is let us wet our beak. Give us control
of your house. Hand over all of your assets to the Podcast is Praxis podcast.
Set a proportion of your house aside equal to the amount that you would have been paying extra, and give us a room in your house.
Yeah.
Give Jamie a room in your house. Let Jamie live with you.
So you remember how like the 2008 crash forced like at least some of us, like me, to learn about like collateralized debt obligations, derivatives, mortgage bundling, all that kind of fun stuff. So today we're going to be learning some more terminology and some more financial shenanigans. And the only way I can sort of tell this story, because it's kind of convoluted, is it's sort of an Inception type story, because we have to go like several levels into the financial shenanigans dream to understand what almost question mark went wrong, and then sort of go back out several layers of the dream to see what then happened in real life. So that's kind of the frame I've decided to go with, because it's just a lot of explaining, essentially. So basically, in level 1... This is a very brief primer on UK pension funds overall. The main and the most important thing to remember is UK pension funds are fucking huge in terms of their asset footprint. They have over £6 trillion worth of total assets, which is essentially more than 3 times UK GDP, which is about 2.1, 2.2 trillion as well. So it's
and can I interject here really briefly, Rob?
Sure.
Just to kind of clarify something for our listener. The reason our pension funds are so huge is because it basically is privatizing a role of the state.
Yes.
Like, realistically, taking care of our old people, much like taking care of our young people, should be something that we do collectively as a state. But since we don't, we privatize it, and thus it gets jacked up even higher. And that's why there are trillions in pensions. It's because it's stuff that realistically should be handled through taxation and planning based on taxation. Modern monetary theorists don't come at me, but we don't do that. So instead it goes for private sector, and they add on like a crippling, eye-watering percentage on top, and here we are today.
Exactly.
Carry on, Rob.
I'm just going to interject a second because, like, once again, reality has fucked us. We were literally just talking 10 minutes ago about how you don't have legs in the metaverse, and someone's just sent me a fucking tweet. Meta announces full-body avatars with legs.
Motherfucker.
Zuckerberg just fucking listening to our calls again.
Once again, we record a podcast that's old news as soon as we record it.
As soon as it comes out of our fucking mouth, yeah. Yeah, but yeah.
So this is level 2 of the metaverse, then?
Yeah, The Sims.
Wait, who's that in the Discord call?
Anyway, yeah, James is right. Like, the pensions are incredibly important because obviously old age and people stop working, and we have basically privatized all of it. I mean, like, there is still the state pension, so far as I know, but basically good luck existing on that amount of money. That said, like, pension funds are still among like the last harshly regulated industries left in the entire world, because essentially even this government, well, maybe not this one, but like every government before this one knew that you can't fuck with the old and or pensions because basically all people vote, and they vote Tory in massive cases. So that doesn't mean they haven't tried to get pension funds into like more risky assets and stuff, which is part of the problem we have now. But like, pension funds are still quite harshly regulated, and pension funds, at a very basic level, pension funds need to hold absolutely huge amounts of stocks and bonds in order to pay out every month on time to their clients, their pensioners, and to make a profit for themselves. And moreover, the stuff that they need to hold to pay out needs to be absolutely safe as shit, because obviously you can't have pension funds falling over because they've invested all their money in metaverse horseshit. Like, there's a reason pension funds are not in that.
It sounds very much to me like these like scared pensioners should embrace the market more freely. Because what life is worth living without like fucking a little risk? And then when you lose your pension, what life is worth living without the value of producing something for society? Get a fucking job.
Essentially, and if you're thinking about like a very risk-free, very safe asset, the main thing you're talking about is state bonds.
A house that you bought for 6 shillings in 1947.
Essentially, pension funds are up to the eyeballs, as they are technically sort of supposed to be if we have a privatized pension sector, in UK state debt gilts. They have huge chunks of it, because essentially gilts are essentially a promise that the UK state will be around in 10, 20, 30 years to pay the interest and to pay off, everything.
Yeah, I spy with my little eye something that ends in tears.
Yeah, it's very much like they are the safest asset. What's that? Is that an asterisk that's growing steadily larger?
Yeah.
Oh dear.
I mean, part of the story, and we'll get to it later, is by God is that Kwati Kwazang's music I hear there. But back to the primer. Basically, there are two types of pensions in the UK. One that's much more current, that's called a defined contribution pension, is where you put money into a fund. The fund invests it, quote unquote, wisely. And by the time you retire, you have like a giant pot of money, which you can either withdraw as a big lump sum in bits by month, etc. But like that's essentially, you only get as much out of it as you put into it and as much as the fund itself makes. That's not the bit we're talking about. The bit we're talking about is and that's in trouble, is the defined benefit pensions. These are also known as workplace pensions, or they're still sometimes called like gold-plated pensions. They pay out every month like your salary or a percentage of your salary. Determined by your workplace. It's like an average, or like it's a final year. Like if you earned £5,000 in your per month in your last job, it will pay out like 4,000 a month for the rest of your life. And these are the ones that got into some severe bother, essentially. This type of pension doesn't exist anymore for young people. Like, we don't get to have it because this is like a good pension. But old people definitely do have them, including huge brick tons of boomers who have this pension above what they get from the triple locked state one. And the problem, as we've seen in the last couple of days in the markets, comes from how these defined benefit pensions are structured. They're a huge chunk. Again, they're like, in total, the value of what they have inside them is about 1.5 trillion in total assets. So it's about 2/3 of UK's GDP last year. So they are of a size that is so big that if they were to hypothetically collapse, it's almost too big for the state to manage. Like, you couldn't have the Bank of England clean it up because the amounts are so huge. So that's a very fundamental.
Give it a good go, though, wouldn't they? Feels like,
I mean, they did,
but a huge check try and cut a check for 1.5 trillion to keep the old satisfied. It's very much in line with what the.
It's possible, but like it's hard to. I don't want to speculate too much on what would happen in that case, but like it would be very bad in all caps, essentially. But if you are a pension, like this type of pension, the type of payout you're doing is kind of a problem. Like, you can imagine it, right? Because with the first type, all right, you just get like a big lump sum of money when you retire, and that's it. With these ones, you have to pay out every month to a huge group of pensioners, and they expect a fixed amount every first of the month, but you have to pay them out based on market conditions, which may or may not be stable, essentially. Like, markets can go up and down every month. So do you have enough like assets and reserves to pay out every month on the first without fail, ever, essentially? So one of the most important things that these defined benefit pension funds have, they need to smooth out the ups and downs of the market to make these payments on time without fail, ever. Like, that's critical to the survival of pensions and to not upsetting the old, basically speaking. And how that is done involves, under current circumstances, quite a lot of financial engineering, some of which has caused the crisis in the last couple of days. Mainly a pension investment strategy, so like the way the pension funds themselves invest. And that strategy is called liability-driven investment. That's the big term. That's sort of the engine at the heart of the current calamity. About much more in a bit, because I'm going to do my best to explain how that worked, and also why it went kerplunk, and then why that necessitated the Bank of England to step in and put a whole bunch of money in the market that it really didn't want to do, basically. That's roughly the structure of this. So this is like one layer down, and pension funds over the last decade or so have been in a bit of a bother because if you remember, in the last decade, since we've had the financial crisis, certainly since Rona, we've had quantitative easing and zero interest rates. Now, zero interest rates are a huge problem for pension funds because they rely on the payouts from the gilts they own, like the interest rate you get on state obligations. They rely on that income to pay out to pensioners. But if there's zero interest, you're not getting the monthly payout that you need to pay out your pensioners. So that's that's a massive problem.
Should we? I'm gonna break it down a little bit, Rob, for the benefit of our audience, because I know there's people who listen who are not as financially literate as you or I. To explain what the interest rates work, how they work in the base kind of scenario. Essentially, you give the UK government, let's say, 100 grand, and it gives you a gilt in return that has a fixed time at which it will come to fruition. So in like 6 months, a year, 2.5 years, 5 years, 10 years, all the way up, essentially. And the idea is you don't get like an ongoing payment. Instead, when the bond comes due, the gilt comes due, you're given that plus a percentage, right?
Yeah.
So say that the yield returns are 5% and you invest 100 grand, then you'll get 105 grand back at the time it comes mature. It comes to the end of its lifetime. And so when they talk about lowering interest rates, what they're basically saying is we will put the interest on these bonds to zero. So actually, we won't give you any extra money back in return. And you might say, well, why take this? Surely inflation, which is in normal years about 2.5%, will just eat away. And the answer is, if you're really unsure where your money will be safe, at least this guarantees you only take a 2.5% hit, right? And so off the back of Corona, they set the interest rates very low because people were looking for safe places to park their money, and also because a lot of our financial shenanigans are built off the back of this number, particularly to do with banking. And it's to do with the way that banks essentially backstop their money. Banks have to have UK gilts and bonds registered with the Bank of England, essentially, to guarantee that they're solvent. And, you know, by setting the interest rates on that to zero, it essentially did a lot of financial shenanigans that propped the banks up a bit. Does that about cover it, Rob?
Yeah. I mean, if you want to get more like detail on this, we did a double header on central banking, which explains quite a bit of this in much more detail.
Yes.
It's episode 125, and then 126 is behind the Patreon paywall. So, you know, become a Patreon sub anyway. So in essence, the main problem, again, that pension funds have is they need to match the assets they have, i.e. the big piles of stocks and bonds, including tons and tons of these gilts, with their liabilities, all the pensions, all the defined benefits payments that have to pay out on the dot every month, all the time. And in a world, as James was just explaining, where there is zero interest rates, you can't just pay out your customers on the small margin, however small it is, of the big piles of gilts you keep around. You need to go into slightly riskier assets to make the money you need to pay out everybody all the time. So you just need to do some engineering. And that's not necessarily bad as long as we're in this capitalist framework. Like you can do that. And I have to say that like this strategy that a lot of them employed, the liability-driven investment strategy, worked pretty well for like a decade almost. Like it did its job in terms of keeping the system alive and afloat and the pension payments going out. So how does a pension fund do its job in this world, and what is a liability-driven investment? So the basis of an LDI, liability-driven investment, is to try and overcome two things. Again, it's the mismatch between market ups and downs and the absolute need to pay out pensioners every month on the month. And the last decade problem of how do you keep paying those pensions when a big chunk of the assets you hold, those gilts, don't pay out anymore and aren't so readily available because the central bank is buying a lot of them. Again, please listen to the central banking episode because that explains that last bit. For now, just believe me that that's what they're doing. So what you need, in essence, is a form of insurance. Like, you need to pay out. The regulator wants to know that you have enough money for your pensioners, but you've been facing a very long-run trend of very low yields on that massive pile of gilts you hold. Like, you're not getting the money that you were expecting when you bought a chunk of that. And LDI, liability-driven investment, is designed to do exactly that. You take some of your money, you keep buying state assets, the gilts, and you take another chunk and you put it into like slightly more risky assets where you hope and or assume there will be some growth. So corporate credit, equities, property, etc. Like, so you have, that's like the 2 points of the seesaw, right? You have the gilts, you have the state stuff, and you have slightly more risky assets. And those are sort of, the key element in that is to balance those two so you get just enough money every month to be able to pay out all the time and be as safe as you possibly can. So
I want to drop a massive pin here and just say, when we're talking about them balancing with corporate debt, towards the end of this episode, I want to come back here because I think there's something going on. Carry on, Rob.
Yeah. So I mean, there's shit tons going on. However, because you're a pension fund, you want to be super safe. So you don't want to just like hold a big pile of gilts and hold some like property, mortgages, and other stuff that's still as safe as quote unquote possible. You want to like make sure that it is like that you're insured, that your risk is insured on either side of that. This is what is called hedging. It's very common in financial markets. It's literally, you know the phrase hedging your bets? It's literally that. They are hedging their bets by saying, well, if the value of the properties that I hold goes down, I have another sort of contract that catches the other side of that, and that sort of brings the seesaw in balance all the time. You could do this hedging, like this creating balance and sort of moving risk away from you through a near infinite number of shenanigans that I can't get into because they are nearly infinite. Mainly they involve derivatives, which are a certain type of contract. Again, I can't really explain it too much because we'll be here for 5 hours. But you can take, essentially, they allow you to take the opposite movement, both positive or negative, to anything you want or don't want to happen. So like if you're worried that the value of your central London property goes up too much, you can get an investment bank to make you a derivative that takes the other side of that trade and then sort of balance it out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like there's a really easy way to cut through this, which is to say it's financial betting. You basically go to the casino, which is in reality it's a financial investment firm of some kind, usually someone like Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan Chase.
Yes.
And you basically say, hey, listen, I would like you to make me a market, aka I would like to place a bet and I'd like you to be the casino on this going this way. What do you calculate the odds as? And then they'll sit there and they'll go, right, we think the odds are this, therefore for it to be worth our time, this has to be the payout and this has to be how much you have to pay us to maintain this bet. So this'll like it sounds a bit abstract, but really a lot of this is obfuscating the fact it's just financial betting.
Yeah,
is really what it is.
To use your casino metaphor, because it's really good actually. Like for one more step, like what they're doing is like they have 5,000 chips on black, which is the gilts, and then they have 5,001 chips on the slightly more riskier pile, the everything else pile, and so there's a slight imbalance, and in order to correct that balance, they hedge it again with these synthetic contracts with like Goldman Sachs, the stuff that James was just talking about. So you're constantly balancing the two to make sure that everything is in order so you can keep paying out and make a sort of marginal amount of profit all along the way. So it's essentially...
It's the thing where you use the roulette table to come out like slightly laundered, whereby you put some on black, some on red, and some on the mid, and then you're good, essentially.
Yeah.
That's kind of it. That's what they're doing, just in a very abstract way.
Yeah, they're doing that, and essentially they're placing so many chips on so many different squares that no matter the outcome, theoretically speaking, they should always make a small amount of money. Like they'll lose some, but they'll make some on the other side. If you lose all your chips on black, but it comes up red, then you'll still make your money. You see what I mean? Like you're very carefully trying to keep all these things in balance to not go down, and that's the very essence. Not just the hedging in general, but that's the core of what they were trying to do with this liability-driven investment, this LDI system. So that means
there is one last note, which is if you're clever, you've probably spotted, hang on, wait a minute, why would the casino let this go on then? Because surely if you're always just coming slightly ahead, the casino is losing money. And the answer is, for every one of these markets the casino makes, they find some sucker somewhere to take the opposite side. So they essentially hedge as well. And so this system only works as long as there's people who are done with money willing to essentially take the other side of the derivative contracts.
It doesn't even necessarily need to be dumb money. It can also be very smart money, but you do need to find people on the other side. And if you're wondering, well, then how does BlackRock or Goldman Sachs or UBS or whoever make their money? Well, they take fees off the top. You know, they make their money up front, and what happens to your actual bet in a lot of cases isn't very relevant to them, because all they're doing is like raking a fee off the top and matching you with the person on the other side of the roulette, on the other side of the roulette table. It doesn't really matter to them.
Whenever you go and convert your money into chips in their casino, they take a percentage.
Yes.
And so that's them coming and going. They don't care what plays out on the table. If you will, the tables are built around having suckers in to play on them. And they might not even, like, to be crystal clear, it might not even be that they balance on the same derivatives. It might just be that they sell you one contract that says, oh, I expect the price of houses to go up. And then they sell someone else a contract which is, I expect the houses to go down. And they match these themselves. So you don't even necessarily know about the sucker on the other end who's making you whole. This is how finance works. And if it sounds shady as hell, it's because it is.
Yeah. And then there's one more trick they sort of did on top of this, is they didn't just put like all the chips they put on the table, the pension funds did, wasn't necessarily all their own money. They also went to like other banks and said, can we borrow some money and then place the borrowed money on the roulette table? Because again, normally speaking, that's not too bad, because if these strategies keep working out, you can always pay the more borrowed money back, because like the margins you're trying to correct with are very small, even though the amounts you're betting are fucking huge. So it doesn't hugely matter. And that's essentially, that's known as leverage. You borrow a certain amount of money, you insert some of your own money, and then the idea is, because you can borrow, if you borrow some of the money, but all the profit you make you keep, and then you just pay the borrowed money back, and then you can just keep doing that over and over and over again.
Yeah, and to kind of insert this in, it's like, imagine you go to a loan shark, and every week you borrow $1,000 from a loan shark, and you return like $1,100 to the loan shark, like regularly, right? One week you turn up and you're like, listen, I've only got $1,000 like and 80 quid here. The loan shark's not going to break your legs over it, because he's like, I know you're good for it, it's fine. It's a minor variation. Just make it up next time, right? Because he's not going to throw out a good thing just because you're a little short.
Yeah, he's not Jamie Oliver disciplining his children. So
the problem is, what if it blows up really badly and you're not just 20 quid short, you're a substantial amount short to your loan shark? Wonder how badly that could go. Carry on, Rob.
Yeah, and essentially I have to add one more thing to this metaphor, then I promise, like, this is the end of the complexity.
This is a very unwieldy metaphor.
It is. The metaphor is becoming quite unwieldy, but I hope I can put like one more Jenga block on it before the whole thing fucking teeters over.
One more Jenga block on the metaphor so that the metaphor can still make sense. Are we going to get in a car next and then we can use that?
I mean, look, if decks of cards collapse, it's terrible. We all know this from the last premium. So in the loan shark metaphor, which is quite correct. There's one more thing. Like, the loan shark will also say to you, look, I'm happy to give you some extra money, to loan you some extra money. That's all fine by me, but I want to make sure that if things go tits up, that like you got me. Like that you will pay me back. So like, you don't have to park the full amount with me, but you do have to, like, for every £1,000 you borrow from me, I want you to give me 200 as a kind of insurance, so that like if you suffer some small losses, I won't immediately have to like come to you. I can just take that out of the 200 quid that you've parked with me, like in an envelope, essentially.
So to summarize, the financial houses of JP Morgan, Chase and Goldman Sachs and all the rest of them, they are essentially the people who run the casinos. They make their money by charging you for converting your cash into chips. They don't really care how the bets go on the casino floors, because there's always some sucker on the other side who's losing, who they have brought into the casino to play. And then when you go to borrow money, the loan sharks that you borrow it from are these other financial institutions, and they will sometimes, like, you know, they're happy for you to have a running account with them, but if you're borrowing a lot of money, they'll sometimes ask you to, like, leave your car with them as collateral so they can always sell that if things get a bit hairy.
This is literally known as collateral. That is the term for it. And the thing that, like, the loan sharks or the financial companies can do is, if your bets on the roulette table start going sideways, they can do what is called a margin call. And that is when they say, look, we're getting a bit worried that, like, all that pension money you have out on the roulette table is not going the right way. So a margin call is them saying, look, you have 200 quid in the envelope with us now. We would like you to park an extra 200 in there because we're getting a bit worried that, like, you're not actually good for the money if things go totally fucking sideways.
Yeah, they're picking up the phone and going, listen, you told me what horses you were going to bet on, and half of those races have come up bust. So I'm getting a bit nervous, and before I'll loan you any more, I want you to,
and if you
addition to your...
Yeah. If you want to
give me your mortgage, essentially.
If you want to keep this bet going, this whole insurance system that you've built around your own roulette table, if you want to keep this whole system going, which you absolutely must, because otherwise you're fully exposed to the swings of the market, we need some more money off you, just to keep all the bets and the side bets on the table, so as not to disturb the system. But that's essentially, this is about as deep into the thing as we're going to go. So I hope that it's sort of clear for everybody. Just in case it's not, we'll do like a sort of midway point recap. UK pension funds are huge. About a third of them is dedicated to these defined benefits like final salary pensions. It's about a £1.5 trillion market. These pension funds have to maintain a very difficult balanced market position where they need to pay out every time on time, but they have to deal with the vagaries of the bonds and stock markets. And they need to hold huge amounts of safe assets like UK gilts, UK state debt, to make sure that they can not just pay out, but the stuff they're using to pay out overnight isn't going to vanish. So, like, everybody's assuming the UK state will still be around in 10, 20 years, and that's why gilts are considered to be incredibly safe. However, there's been a long decade where you got no money back on these gilts that you're holding because of central bank shenanigans. So they needed to venture outside of the safest of safe markets in order to get returns they need to pay out the pensioners. In order to still be as safe as possible while venturing out on the roulette table, they employ an investment strategy known as liability-driven investment, or LDI. It's a series of very complicated financial shenanigans where essentially you move into slightly riskier assets that offer you more money back than the zero you are currently getting from the gilts. But in order to make those bets that you're making slightly safer, you hedge that risk by taking the opposite side of the same trade with synthetic trades known as derivatives. This is a permanent balancing act. You're balancing not just the gilts with the slightly riskier assets, but you're within that slightly riskier asset class, you're also balancing those with opposite trades. It's a permanently readjusting balancing act. And these derivatives, the loan sharks that we were just talking about, they demand that you put up a certain amount of collateral of a side pocket, like an envelope full of money, to prove that you're good should things go tits up. And the person holding that envelope can also call you and say, you need to put more money in the envelope because we're getting a bit worried about the bets that you have placed with us. However, not all pension funds, not all the time, have kept 100% of the pennies in the envelope to make good on the promises they've made. So instead of you have borrowed 1,000 from the loan shark, there's 1,000 in the envelope they have, there's 800 in there or 600, or there's a margin in there where things can go wrong. This is known as leverage. Basically, you give a certain amount of collateral to guarantee the insurance policies to keep the seesaw balanced. That's also linked to the yields of gilts, but only to a certain level. So now we're going to start coming out of the inception and start walking back to reality. And we're going to see what happens when Kwasi Kwarteng stands up in Parliament and is a big old fucking idiot. So this is reverse the dream, honk. if you
So
will.
we've kicked the chairs out, and we're all falling into water at the moment.
Exactly. But we don't immediately fall out of all the dreams. We fall sequentially sort of back into reality and then sort of return to unreality. I don't know. It's just, this metaphor kind of sucks, but we're too late into the episode to change it now, so we're going to have to live with it. Essentially what happens, Kwasi Kwarteng stands up on, I think it was the 23rd of September, and says, here's not a budget, because that has to like come with graphs and prognostications attached. Here's a budget event where we are going to do like 45 billion in unfunded tax cuts, mainly going to very rich people. That bit's now...
I just want to say, fiscal event has the same sort of vibe to it as cardiac event.
Yes, it does. And to be crystal clear, just to really drive home how stupid and venal and corrupt all of this is, the reason it's not a budget is if it was a budget, the civil service, essentially, would get a crack at saying, what do we reckon the effects of this budget will be?
Yes.
They would explain the costings of it. And Kwasi Kwarteng is, don't look behind the curtain, don't think about it, mate. It's not a budget, so we're just going to call it a fiscal event instead, so that the civil service can't get their hands on it and tell everyone, so they can't warn everyone how terrible this is going to be, essentially, right?
Yes.
We are not making this up. That's the entire reason they called it a fiscal event. To get away from the civil service basically going, oh shit, this guy's going to fall if you do this.
Having to like provide graphs and projections forward, however wrong those usually are. But like normally when states do budget, when like advanced economies do budget, there's like, they put a bunch of stuff in the back saying, we think that this is about the effect that what we're doing is going to have on the financial budget of this country in the next 12 months, 24 months, 5 years, 10 years, etc., etc. Those predictions are usually wrong, but it's quite important that you have them anyway. Not because they're wrong, but because like it makes people like financial analysts and like citizens kind of, however fake it is, it provides a sort of sense of security that somebody's thought this shit through. So what Kwarteng did was the opposite of that. And the market said, oh, wait, you want to do another huge chunk of borrowing more money, which is no longer free, and you want to use it for tax cuts that even like we think are incredibly dumb and badly targeted and won't do anything like to help the actual position of the UK economy. Like even the Financial Times comment section in response to this budget was like, this is fucking stupid. I will make more money. I don't need this money. It got to that point, which is rare.
I think we need to like really hammer home just how much the music has fucking stopped for like any sort of allusion to like trickle down economics.
Yes,
it's completely over. Well,
for some time, like there is a tension here, which is, and the financial comment section guy said this, which is, what's the point of being privately wealthy if you're publicly impoverished, right?
Yes.
You know, none of them want to live in like their fucking Mad Max citadels in the middle of the wasteland. Like they're not quite that sociopathic, right? Unlike the ones at the very, very top. And so the way this kind of works is there is a tension where trickle-down economics is a lie. And it's a lie. It's a lie specifically to justify more money for us and fuck you, right? It is like all economics is at one level or another, an excuse to pull the wool over your eyes and get you to go along with giving more money to the wealthy. But underlying this, the smart ones, who are usually the ones who are plugged in financially, know that what makes countries wealthy is basically the infrastructure of a country and basic things like, you know, having an educated populace that can do the jobs you want them to do.
Yeah.
Having roads that you can drive on, having drinkable drinking water, having healthcare so the population is fit enough to work, things like this.
Exactly.
And what's happening is we're now cutting so into the bone, we're so deep into it, that they're kind of going, hey, This is not a case of just giving us more money now. Now you're talking about destabilizing the entire grift that we rest upon.
Now you're with this stuff, and even though, like, look, 45 billion on like a UK GDP of over 2 trillion is not that much, but it was a signal that they loudly and publicly sent to the entire world, saying, we're just going to fucking YOLO this, and our like weird libertarian ideas are correct. No, we don't have a report card on this, but you don't need one. And we assume that you're going to love this because you're just as insane a libertarian as we are. And what specifically happened then is, as James was just saying, like the people who look at the long-term health and who want their money back on the long-term health of the UK economy, by which we're talking then about gilts. A gilt has a lifespan of up to like 30 years. So if you have a shit ton of gilts, like a pension fund would, that's a problem for you because like if you turn the dial of the UK to Mad Max, then suddenly something that's going to pay off in 30 years might not be as valuable as you thought yesterday. Because now the new government has signaled loudly that they are made of imbeciles and idiot fucker morons, basically.
Yeah, basically, why would you take a 30-year gilt if you're not convinced the UK is going to be around in 30 years?
Yeah,
right? If they're going or unable to pay.
Yeah, or unable to pay, or the inflation's gotten so high that you might as well like burn the money in the first place. So like the markets essentially, because they were already like generally hinky and a little bit spooked because of energy prices, inflation rising, the war in the Ukraine, all like the other stuff. Like they were already more on the lookout. They're more jittery than they have been in like for a decade. Also because the central banks have like stopped printing free money for everybody all the time. So they're much more like looking out for reality, if you will. And indeed, right after the Kwarteng announcements, reality sort of reasserted itself. Two things happened. The value of the pound plummeted against the dollar or the euro and pretty much every other currency. That's mostly been recovered, but that's not what I want to talk about. The other thing was a huge rise in the interest rate you pay on gilts, because there's an inverse relationship between the interest rate that you get for holding one and the value of the gilt, which you can understand, right? The interest rate is basically the risk premium. A very high interest rate is something you get if you're worried that your bet's not going to pay off. Like, I think a country, not a great example, but we'll use it for now, but like a country like Zimbabwe will have to pay like 25-30% interest per year on any like state bonds they issue because nobody fucking trusts the Zimbabwean government to actually pay off at the end of 5 years or 10 years and essentially not be around.
Yeah, it's like making it attractive enough. You're looking at this going, well, I'm not convinced Zimbabwe, say, is going to be around. And I actually don't think that's fair to say Zimbabwe. Let's talk about, say, Greece during the Euro crisis, right? Because that's a historical event. Let's say I'm not sure Greece is actually going to be solvent and part of the Euro and able to repay me, but they're offering 20%, so maybe I take a punt on it anyway, and if it turns out okay, I'm doing great. That's literally why they crank the interest rate, is to make investors go, well, I'll take a gamble, essentially, right? That's what it is.
Yeah. The higher the interest rate, the more the financial markets are worried about you fucking it up completely, which is an inverse to the value, because if like U.S. treasuries and gilts up until like a week ago were like considered incredibly safe. So if financial markets overall are super fucking spooked, they say, all right, well, we might not get the same amount of money as we would get in like UK mortgages or like, I don't know, anything else like shares of Facebook, because we see Meta is fucking stupid, for example. All right, I'll take my money and I'll buy gilts with it. They may not pay out as well as like shares in Meta do, but they are safe as houses. So like there's an inverse relationship. If the price of the gilt is super high, it means the risk is low. And if the risk is high, the price of the gilt itself is low. So it's an inverse relationship. So,
and just as a little interjection, this is literally socializing the losses and privatizing the profits at work when you really drill down into it.
Yeah.
It's basically saying the state will underwrite you when times are risky. Except, well, I mean, that doesn't work if you're worried the state might not actually be able to underwrite you. I'd put it like this, like, you know, for years I've been saying, yes, trickle down. We'll just give tax cuts to the top and it'll trickle down. And don't worry, we can keep doing this indefinitely, and like God will sort it out. And they've all been laughing and winking at each other. And this has been going and going and going and going. And now Kwarteng's come in and it's like, yes, let's cut the throat of the poor, and like God will make it all okay. Yeah. And suddenly a bunch of people have kind of put their drinks down and looked at Kwarteng and went, wait, you're serious?
Yeah,
and they've panicked.
Yeah, pretty much. But I have to say, and we're going to get back to the thing, but the pension funds and the liability-driven investment now, a big important thing overall overall, a rise in gilt interest rates is super good for pension funds because they hold massive piles and piles and piles and piles and piles of these fucking things. And if the interest rates goes up, they get more every month. So on the long run, a high interest rate is super good if you hold giant piles of gilts. That's like it. And the UK sees it keeps going, like keeps being a going concern that will actually meet the payments on the gilts that you hold. But we're going to assume that that's the case. We're going to be optimistic.
It's not like us.
I mean,
Yeah, David's not here though.
I mean, overall, on the long run, like stretched out over the long term, UK pension funds right now, because of the rising gilts, are probably better covered now than they have been for like the last decade. Because all the stuff they used to hold that had like they had to hold but brought now returns is still stuff they have to hold, but now it brings like in like really good returns. So like overall, on the long term, pension funds benefit immensely from this type of movement, from high interest rates on gilts. But on the short term, and now we're sort of we're kicking the chair again. We're dunking in water and we're going back another stage. On the short term, what happened is essentially because the gilt markets moved so fast, they essentially created sort of heart attack in the liability-driven investment schemes. And essentially they unbalanced that very careful seesaw between safe assets and riskier stuff that I was talking about earlier. So in essence, what happened when Kwasi Kwarteng announced this fiscal event, not a budget, it spooked the markets very, very badly, and that created like a tilt in the seesaw that was like several times bigger than anybody had ever thought would be possible. Like the rise in the yields of the gilts was so high, it was like a once in a lifetime event. Like it had been seen, that kind of movement had not been seen for like 80 years. So like it was a huge and like nigh immediate spike on right after the announcement, and like that really that set off sort of a chain reaction inside the very carefully balanced seesaw that this LDI system depends on. And what happened sort of inside the engine, I'm gonna try to be a little bit superficial because otherwise it's very hard to explain it, and we're going to get lost in the weeds. But essentially, because one end of the seesaw, the gilts, like shot up way quicker than anybody else had ever expected, it meant that the other side of the seesaw, with the slightly riskier investments, also went down very quickly, because these things are always supposed to be in balance, and that's how the contracts are constructed. And because of the imbalance that went on the other side, so that's, if you remember, that's the slightly riskier stuff like mortgages, corporate debt, all that stuff. It meant that the people insuring that side of it, like So that meant that the people that were insuring the flip side, so that were saying, okay, we will provide you with security against a giant drop on the slightly riskier side of the seesaw, went back to the pension funds and said, look, there is now so much movement. The money that you gave us in the envelope to sort of cover the spread between what you owe, like the collateral, we no longer have enough collateral to believe that you are going to come good if this thing keeps going as sideways as you were, as it currently is.
So Kwasi's done such a big shit that there's been a run on mops to clear them all up.
Pretty much, yeah. So what they said, they went back to the pension funds and they said, look, if you want to keep all your side bets and everything, if you want to keep this engine running, so the bets and the side bets, all, like the whole very carefully balanced ecosystem that kept the seesaw nigh on in exactly the middle where it was supposed to be, you are going to have to put up more money, because otherwise we're going to take our hands off the wheel, and we will no longer stand guarantee for all the other shit you've been doing. So you have to give us more money now. And that meant that the pension funds freaked out, because they didn't have enough hard cash literally on hand to hand over to the investment banks to say, all right, look, don't worry, we're still good for it. Here's more cash that we can put up straight away. So in trying to solve that immediate problem, is they needed cold hard cash. They needed literally liquidity. So they needed literally numbers on a big spreadsheet and a bank transfer from a big pension fund to Goldman Sachs or BlackRock or Credit Suisse or, pick a big investment bank. But they said, yeah, but you have to pay us because otherwise we're going to take our hands off the seesaw and then the whole thing falls completely out of whack, and that would be very bad in all cap letters. But then, it is at this point, I don't know if you're a very clever listener, you might have spotted it already. You get what is known as a doom loop, because
is that good?
Yes, doom loops are often very good, because what would happen is pension funds need to sell gilts immediately to cover the margin calls from counterparties who say, no, we don't want anything else but cold hard cash. But once they started selling gilts in order to cover their margin calls, there were more gilts on the market, which caused the gilt yield to rise even further and further. And when that started going, the seesaw tipped even more out of kilter, which meant that the investment banks on the other side said, well, yeah, you've given us some cash, but now the seesaw is even more out of kilter, so you're going to have to give us more cash because now we don't trust you anymore. To which then
there's also a major problem happened here in that the gilt market basically crashed and people stopped buying them because the value of them was devaluing so quickly that they couldn't sell them.
And because
usually they'd be able to sell the gilts, but they couldn't sell them.
Very briefly, it was also very difficult to find people to buy them. That also happened. But the main problem was apart from that, people didn't want to buy them. The main problem really was that pension funds had to sell gilts in order to get the cash to pay to meet the margin calls. But in order to do that, they drove the yield further up, which caused more margin calls, which caused more sell-off, which caused more margin calls, etc., etc. And had that kept going, that's a doom loop, right? That doesn't stop, because every time you sell more assets to meet the margin calls, you make the underlying condition worse, which causes you to have to, which causes more margin calls, which causes more asset sales, which causes essentially until there is a gigantic black hole sucking void that starts to emerge within the financial markets, and specifically within these defined benefit pension funds, which, remember, is a £1.5 trillion market, which is too big for the UK government or probably even the UK central bank to stand guarantee for, had the whole thing really started going on the slide and gone kablooey.
Yeah, and it's also worth understanding that when I say they couldn't sell their gilts, essentially, that the gilt market crashed, the thing to understand is, as they had to basically they had to sell the gilts for lower and lower, and then there's a cut-off point where they can't sell the gilts below this point, or the seesaw just completely collapses because suddenly their assets just won't be able to pay out what they projected they needed. They're bankrupt, essentially.
Yeah.
And so in practice, what happened is they sold up to a certain point, they all stopped selling gilts on the gilt market because they couldn't go beyond that point, and they started trying to offload other assets as best they could, which then was potentially threatening a run in other areas of the economy.
Yeah.
And so the whole thing was just turbo fucked pretty much instantly. And the headlines that we got after the fact said it was about, 2 hours away from total meltdown and annihilation?
I mean, it depends. For one, I should be really careful in saying that, while this doom loop that I was just talking about had it continued unabated infinitely, it would have caused probably a total meltdown in pension funds and from there into the wider economy. But it was a problem. It was a liquidity problem. It was a problem of cold hard cash on hand. Because if you remember, on the long term, the interest rate on gilts going up is incredibly good for pension funds. So they weren't going bankrupt in a literal Lehman Brothers kind of way. They had drawn down and they hadn't opened up their wallet and there were two comical flies coming out of it. It was just they'd run out of cold hard cash. So that's I really want to make that as an incredibly important distinction between liquidity and being actually a going concern. What had happened is they were running out of cash, and that had caused essentially the doom loop to start, which, had it not been stopped, could have in the end maybe caused collapses of pension funds. But it's not had this gone on for another 2 hours, the pension funds would have gone bankrupt because they had enough assets. They had a huge amount of assets still. So it's it's not quite like the bad things would have happened, but it's not like had the Bank of England not stepped in on Friday, the pension funds would have gone bankrupt. That could have happened, but not like for a long time to come. So I want to just make sure that like we love doom on this podcast, and I love talking about financial doom, but there is an important distinction to make between the two here.
I'm not convinced, but we'll have that discussion another time, I think. Anyway, so Rob, what did the Bank of England do to make everything okay?
Yeah, essentially what happened was two things happened. There was quite a screeching policy reversal from the Tories within like a foreseeable amount of time. It took a couple of days, but they said, "Oh fuck," like we can't do this, and they promised to reverse some of the tax cuts. They promised that they would actually have like the civil service produce some graphs and balances and scoring of the whole thing. They put in some people in the Treasury that had more trust from the financial markets than others. So that was round one. But the big one that happened on the immediate term is that the Bank of England stepped in and said, right, contrary to everything that we've been announcing in the last couple of months in terms of we are not going to buy any more bonds, we're not going to do any more quantitative easing. We're actually going to like hike up the interest rates and start selling off our assets. Contrary to everything we've just said in the last 2 months, we're going to do the exact reverse, and we are going to have to buy up to 65 billion worth of these long-term gilts, essentially because that would stabilize the market.
Disregard what I was saying previously. I actually mean the opposite of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So like what the Bank of England said, look, we are going to magic.
Is it good when a bank does that?
The Bank of England
Fucking
said,
state bank.
we are going to magic up 65 billion worth of pounds with which we can buy these gilts from pension funds, and that will stop the doom loop because we will make 65 billion of extra cash available with which the pension funds can meet these margin calls. Don't worry about it. It's not just the amount of money that they made available. It's essentially they said to the financial markets, there's no point in doing more margin calls because we, the Bank of England, the people with the money printers, will be around to backstop this shit, so back off. And that's literally what happened pretty much immediately.
Yeah, like essentially they identified the problem in the gilt market that was going to cripple the pension funds, and they turned around and said, right, pension funds, since you're driving this, we'll cash you out early.
Yes.
We'll cash you out early. We'll print money now, and we will give you your bonds before their yield date. And that will allow you to meet your margin calls. That means that you are backed by us. Like, we've got you. We are making an exception to our own rules. We are taking your liability into our structure. And the margin calls went, oh, well, I suppose if the Bank of England has got their back, then I don't need to worry about getting paid, so I can stop doing my margin calls.
Exactly. Now I have faith and trust again that the seesaw will continue to operate, that I'm not going to be left holding the bag, and therefore everything is fine. There's also a certain amount of speculation that I've read this afternoon that it's not so much that the end problem wasn't actually in the pension funds, but rather in the people who had taken the opposite bet in all these seesaw trades, and that they were going to go.
Yay!
That's
so. You know how I said I wanted to drop a pin area about corporate debt.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a theory. My theory is that the other side of a seesaw for the pension funds, when gilts went to zero, the pension funds like, where can we put money? And there's a massive corporate debt bubble right now. And so what I think essentially happened is the pension funds all piled into corporate debt, which I think is fairly well established based on what we've been able to see. But it's all murky. It's not traded publicly necessarily, so we don't get to see it. And I think the real danger here was when they realized that if we cash in these gilts at higher and higher prices, that we're gonna be bankrupt. So our only other choice is to offload some of our other assets. And so they started selling corporate debt. And I think the untold story of this is there was the beginnings of, I don't think it was actually really getting going, but the beginnings of a potential run on corporate debt and the popping of the corporate debt bubble on the other side of a seesaw. That's what I think the ghost story of this is, the thing that would have been the real danger had it been allowed to keep going.
Yeah, I mean, it's either that or like that the counterparties to like all these derivatives, like the secondary bets that kept the seesaw, like the poles of the seesaw themselves in balance, would have like not been able to handle the strain, and those are mainly big investment banks. So it could have been it could have been corporate debt, it could have been like problems in the banking sector itself, or it could have been a combination of both. Like, we don't really know this yet, and I don't know if we'll ever know, like, unless what's happening again today keeps going. Like, then we may find out when things go like kablooey again. So this is, I want to start moving towards wrapping this up because anyway, sort of like back to today. Because it turns out that last Friday's 65 billion by the Bank of England may not have like been enough to like fully stop the doom loop and like the sell-off of pension funds to meet the margin calls, because speaking today, and it's the 11th of October, Tuesday the 11th of October, like the interest rates on gilts are rising once again, and they are about halfway to where they were last Friday when the Bank of England had to step in. So that does suggest that right now, at least, and again, it's Tuesday, I genuinely don't know what the fuck's going to be the case in 2 days. It could have gotten worse. It could have gotten like resolved. Who the fuck knows? Like as of this recording, at least, the interest rates are still rising, which does suggest that huge volumes of gilts are still being sold either by pension funds or by now other actors who don't really trust gilts anymore after what has happened in the last couple of days. So we don't really know yet. Like,
yeah, my kind of read, like, you know, my reading of this is that it's not the pension funds. Like, you've got to remember, the thing that initially caused the movement of the gilts was not the pension funds themselves. They just had to come in on it because it started upsetting their seesaw, essentially. I think the pension funds look like they've more or less stopped. They might start up again if this keeps rising. I would suspect it's institutional actors basically going, UK bond market isn't steady and predictable anymore, so we want to divest ourselves of it, and now that's starting to creep in. And I don't know how you stop that, honestly.
I don't know either, but again, this is... At this point in the recording, once we start talking about that, we are sort of entering in the realm of like wild speculation, and I'm going to try not
perish the thought that we do that on podcasting practices.
No, but I'm going to try not to do this because I don't, at least me personally, I don't feel really equipped to like give financial answers at this level of complexity, because
But to clarify, this is not financial advice. Do not make your investing decisions based on our trash talk on this shitpost podcast.
Yeah, but I find it, like, right now, I find it, like, everything is so sort of weird and janky and, like, nervous that, like, you know, whether or not it's more pension funds or it's something else, or, you know, it could also be that by the time this comes out, hopefully on Thursday, that, like, everything will have mostly settled down again, because as is not entirely, I think, out of the question at this moment, the Tories have entirely reversed themselves on this 45 billion package worth of tax cuts. Like, that's like the markets are now starting to literally price in like either a collapse of the Tory government or like a total reversal. All essentially at this point of recording, all options are possible. And given that this is the UK, it will probably be the dumbest one. But like, I don't even know what the dumbest call is at the moment. Like whether or not it's like total meltdown or something else. Like I genuinely don't know at this point. So that's
I can answer that for you, Rob. Is great. I guarantee you the thing that causes the next financial collapse will have nothing to do with any of this. It'll be something that none of us have seen coming whatsoever. It'll be like there is an explosion in like Deutsche Bank or something that's completely disconnected from all of this. You know, that's the dumbest outcome. We spend all the time looking at this and talking about this, and then it's something else that like takes us all out.
Exactly, but on the other hand, like none of us, me included, have really like heard much, if anything, about like liability-driven investment and how defined benefit pensions like were integrated into the UK economy and like how they were structured against the value of the gilt until like literally a couple of days ago. So I spent a lot of time reading about this. So like for me, like the big lesson from this, whether or not it's this thing that like creates the explosions or whether or not it's something else, is like it could just be like it could be anything, because the fragilities are such in the system now. Like capitalism is heading towards another major crisis event because A, we didn't resolve
that can't be right.
really 2008 shit. We just papered it over with insane amounts of money. And B, like
I've heard though, Rob, that capitalism is the most efficient way of distributing resources. So all these collapses you keep going on about, I'm assured, are fine.
Yeah. They are actually a really creative way of destroying things, so you can build new and cooler things over the top of them. So, like, I mean, to me, like, that's kind of where I want to leave it, and I'll leave other people to say whatever they want after this, is, like, reality has, like, after about a decade of, like, financial markets being completely insane, and that's sort of where we started the episode with like NFTs and metaverses and all the horseshit that you get when like there's infinite free money around. Like that era seems to have gone now, and some form of reality is once again asserting itself. And how that's gonna, like, the collision between those two is probably like unmanageable. Certainly not in the current institutional framework. But they are going to do their very level best to manage it anyway. And fuck knows if they will succeed.
Yeah, about a decade ago, they fired everyone out of a cannon and soaring up through the air. They're like, yes, we're climbing higher and higher. Yeah, we can fly. We'll escape the atmosphere. And now it's like, oh, we seem to be leveling out. Yeah. Hey, hang on a minute. Does that ground look like it's getting bigger to you? And that's where we're kind of at. So
yeah.
I don't know, unless Jamie, Alistair, you guys, what do you make of all of this, having sat and listened to me and Rob talking horse shit for the better part of an hour and a half?
Money's not real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much. And for the sake of Rob's nervousness, I guess we'll end it there before we contemplate an impossible fractal future. Should we do plugs? David usually does plugs, so I feel like we ought to.
Yeah. Oh, sure. You can follow us at PraxisCast. You can subscribe to our Patreon, where we've just released another genuinely quite good article read, I think. A very beef-free article read. You can find that at patreon.com/PraxisCast. We also have great merchandise and T-shirts at Jamie. Where is that again?
Praxiscast.tmail.com, I believe.
Yes.
Yep.
And then there's also the streams, which are they still ongoing on Thursdays, I think?
Yes.
Wednesdays and Thursdays, yeah.
Wednesdays and Thursdays. Wednesdays is Vampire Fun Time. Thursdays is alternating Terraria. Well, me torturing Jamie with Terraria, and every other Thursday is me. Well, collectively left Twitter torturing Jamie with Stellaris, which Jamie has been subjugated in his solar system by another empire, so that's been very fun for him.
Yeah.
I literally been getting messages from Jamie going, I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm stuck under the thumb of an empire and can't actually do anything other than listen to Sinan and all the rest of them having fun. So, tune in for that. Enjoy.
Yeah. I mean, what happens when you put, like, two online people and podcasters in a closed-off space is that they all become colonialists at the end of the year. That's my lesson from all of this. So,
to be clear, I wasn't subjugated by anyone else playing the fucking game. It just one of the other players like made their empire the fucking like lost colony of a former like superpower, and the game put me next to that superpower, and like they just fucked my shit up because they had like a huge advantage at the start.
Yeah.
It was just bad fucking luck that I got to sit and do nothing for the whole stream.
Pray for Jamie's Cuban revolution, basically, is what we're saying. And on that note, I think we'll end it here.
Yeah.
So thanks for listening, and catch you all later.
All right, see ya.
All right,
Thanks,
bye.
everyone. Cheers.
Bye.